Hello there. In Great Britain, where people like to look back into the past, there is talk of a second winter of discontent these days. The country experienced its first in 1978-79 when hundreds of thousands of people went on strike to demand better wages. It was the biggest period of industrial action in Britain since the general strike of 1926, and it was the last real rebellion in Britain's unions. Shortly thereafter came Margaret Thatcher's election victory, and in the following decade, the Labour movement suffered one setback after another. The decline was steep and permanent. In 1979, the country still had more than 13 million union members. In 2021, there were only half as many. But something is moving this winter. Several 100,000 employees, including paramedics and nurses, postal workers and conductors, bus drivers and signalers, went on strike in December. RMT rail workers began their second 48-hour walkout this week on Friday, and tens of thousands of nurses across the country walked out on Thursday. And meanwhile, letters are piling up in post offices as the 115,000 or so Royal Mail employees are also on strike for the fourth time this month. Foxes and rats are even said to have been seen in front of some post depots nibbling through undelivered packages. Overall, there should be up to 1 million strike days in 4 weeks across the country. It would be the biggest strike month in over 30 years. In the foreground of the disputes are wage demands. Workers want pay that reflects high inflation, especially high energy prices. Inflation in the UK is currently at 10.7%. The wage increases offered to their employees by the government and private companies, such as the railway companies or Royal Mail, are far below this. This is particularly painful for many because wages have been stagnating for over a decade or even falling when adjusted for prices. An analysis shows that carers, for example, earn 20% less today than they did in 2010, adjusted for inflation. After the stagnation and declining purchasing power over the past 12 years, people are simply not willing to accept a wage cut, said Ian McGoey, lecturer at King's College London, specializing in the history of employment law. And he said, that's why we now have a huge number of strikes we see. However, it is too early to say whether the wave of strikes marks a comprehensive new beginning for the British Labour movement, the beginning of a return to former strength. McGoy is cautious. It's unlikely that the strikes alone will reverse the long decline, he says. The reasons for this decline lie not least in several reforms of labor law in plain language. The union laws have been continuously tightened over the past 40 years. The end of the closed shop was particularly momentous, says McGoey. That was the name of the system in which all employees in a company had to be members of a specific union. Those who weren't allowed to work in the company. Margaret Thatcher put an end to this. In 1990, a 1990 law banned the closed shop. That means people have had to actively seek union membership ever since. And that automatically means that the number of members is slowly decreasing. In addition, the Conservative government passed 6 laws from 1980 to 1993 to make strikes more difficult. Since then, employees have only been allowed to stand at a picket line in front of their own workplace. Solidarity strikes are forbidden. And a further tightening came in 2016. Previously, a simple majority of the votes cast was sufficient for a union to be able to call a strike. But now at least 50% of the members must participate in the vote. Taken together, these successive tightenings mean that Britain now has the most restrictive trade union laws in Europe. And that was also written by lawyer David Renton in the Tribune magazine. This is also a key reason why British unions are considered combative. Nothing works without a fight. Unlike in Germany, where the workforce has a say through work councils, employees in the UK have no way of influencing company decisions. Given the myriad hurdles that successive governments had thrown at organised labour, It is little wonder that strike activity has been at an all-time low in recent years. So if there is currently talk of a union rebellion, you have to put it into perspective. Despite all the hysterical headlines in the conservative press, everything is happening on a relatively modest level, at least if you take a long-term perspective. In the 1980s, there were several longer and more intense strike periods, and compared to the winter of discontent, this December is a piece of cake. In 1979, a total of 30 million strike days were counted. On one day in January alone, 1.5 million public employees went not to work on that day. And Great Britain is far away from that. On the other hand, precisely because the laws are so restrictive and the unions have been rather lethargic in recent years, the importance of the strike period is enormous. The trade unionists are also showing solidarity with other strikers. When the nurses walked out on Thursday, RMT leader Mick Lynch, currently the most recognizable face of the labor movement, walked by their picket to support them. The grassroots campaign Enough is Enough was founded in the summer to provide a framework for this solidarity and to strengthen union cohesion. While there's no attempt to organize a general strike, said McGoey, it's significant that there is a consensus throughout the labor movement that the government and employers have failed. Equally crucial is public support. Despite fierce attacks from the government and the influential conservative press, the people of Britain have so far shown much sympathy for the strikes. According to a poll, half of the public supports the nurses' strike, with only a third opposed, despite major concerns about patient safety. People in Britain are aware that it is the carers who take care of them, the train drivers who take them to their place of work, and the teachers who take care of their children. You want to side with these people, not the oil bosses and shareholders. And as I have to add, not this rich government. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.